Hello, everyone, and welcome to the mediation. My name is Ishrat Jahan, and I'm mediator A for this session. You can refer to me as Ishrat, and for spelling, you can refer to my username. Now, first of all, I would like to thank all the parties for their attendance and presence in this mediation. The fact that you're here on a Sunday amid the pandemic shows your dedication towards this process and platform. With me, mediating will be Kit, and she will delve into the introductory parts of what mediation is and the following procedures. Now, before proceeding forward, could I ask both the parties to make a brief introduction of themselves and refer to the names they would like to be addressed by?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Zachary Hatton, and I am the counsel for FGT in the following proceedings, but you may simply refer to me as Zach.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brienne Mention, and I am the president of the board of the Future Green Tech Company, and you're more than welcome to address me as just Brienne.
Hi, everyone. My name's Zephin. I'm the head of JPC. You're very free to just call me Zephin.
Hi, everyone. I'll be Zephin's lawyer, so lawyer for JPC, and you can call me Jia Ying, but to make it easier, because I know my name is hard to pronounce, you can just call me Lee. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. And now, before moving forward, I would obviously like to draw your attention to the fact that this is an online setting and communication here might not be so smooth every time. So I request both the party to work patiently and help us all work out a solution and listen to each other actively. And the fact remains that Kit and I will be here to help you in every step of the way to find a solution that is not just mutually beneficial for Future Green Charity and Johula Parks Company Limited, but also economically sustainable. And I think we're doing a good job starting the mediation online and reducing the paper wastage. Now, without further ado, I would like to conduct two little steps of verification before handing over to Kit. And those would be that to check that you, Brian, have the complete authority to settle on behalf of Future Green Charity.
I do.
Perfect. And you, Zephin, has the full authority to settle on behalf of Johula Parks Company Limited?
Yes, I do.
Perfect. And may I also check that both of you have signed the agreement to settle that was emailed earlier to you?
Yes.
Okay, I see nodding heads. Thank you so much. Now over to Kit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ishrat. So my name is Kit, as previously introduced by Ishrat, and I'm from Singapore. So the weather's really hot here in Singapore today. So we have had to close the blinds, but unlike the blinds, we hope that all of you will keep the blinds of our hearts open. So before we continue the mediation session, which will be lasting for 90 minutes from 10:45 to 12:15 UK time BST, we confirm if everyone has set aside this period of time for our mediation session today. Perhaps a thumbs up if everyone has done so. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So once again, very good morning to everyone and a very warm welcome to our mediation session. And as mentioned by Ishrat, it's really unfortunate that we cannot meet up in real life due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And in fact, so I hope that everyone here is staying healthy and well. May I check if this volume is fine with everyone? And perhaps another thumbs up if everyone is able to hear me. Thank you. This is just to facilitate the Zoom session today. Yep. So thank you. And I'm very heartened to see that both JPC and FGT are willing parties and that you all have voluntarily chosen to be here on your own accord, albeit on an online platform due to the pandemic. So to start off, I'd like to share a bit about what mediation is like, in my opinion. So to me, mediation is like an unexplored treasure island, which the parties are setting foot on for the first time, where you have us as the mediators, as your tour guides for the jungle ahead. And whilst exploring the treasure island together, just as there are boundless treasures left to be discovered, the opportunities and interests available for both parties to explore are endless. And it is by working together and understanding how, although you may have come to the table today with a set of circumstances, the other party too has their own interests in mind. And this understanding and collaboration is what will help us traverse through the thick of the forest within our treasure island today. And that is precisely the spirit of mediation and where the role of our mediation session today comes in. where at the end of 90 minutes, we hope for each party to have a better understanding of the other's interests, to resolve the differences between both parties. And first of all, I'd like to state some things about mediation that I would like both parties to be aware of. The first being that the mediation session is without prejudice. And what this means is that anything you say here will be kept confidential and will not be used against you in court. I hope this encourages both parties to be open and to talk freely about any particular options or solutions which you might want to discuss with one another. And finally, our adventure would then come to an end today when we have a settlement agreement that both parties find satisfactory and sign on it, allowing what the parties have discussed to be binding. During our exploration of the treasure island, we will explore issues brought forth by both parties fully. And even though we may only have a set time of 90 minutes set aside today for this mediation session, do be rest assured that we can continue our exploration in subsequent mediation sessions should both parties so desire. Now, I'll be passing my time back to Ishrat to elaborate on some rules before I elaborate on the ground rules.
Thank you so much, Kip, for that amazing analogy and discussion on mediation. Now, I would like to address everybody about the role of Kit and myself as mediators today. The role that we represent today are not that of a judge, and no strict rules of evidence applies here because this is an out-of-court settlement. Our role will merely be to facilitate your decision-making, to help you reach the plans you want to reach on your request. Remember, it is you who are in control, not us. We will be taking those steps with you, and we would constantly be checking every offer you make, just for your benefits, just so that those meet your needs and your standards. Now, I would also personally like to add an analogy that if both the parties before me are two journalists who are aspiring to write great articles and they bring their ideas, they want to do it in their certain way. What the mediator here does is filters out what works for the article and what does not, and helps the parties to realize what they want to incorporate and what they do not. So with that being said, I would like to move on to the procedure and the sequence of how everything will follow. First of all, as you have seen that mediator Kit and I will be done with our opening statements, after which it will be the turn of the parties to introduce their position and put their interests forth, from which we can point out the agenda and the points that the parties want to talk about in depth. After that, we'll be holding joint session, which will consist of both the parties talking to each other and reacting to what is being said. Occasionally, we might need to host some private sessions whenever we feel that the conversation is not moving forward, or if we feel that the parties would be comfortable with us in a private setting, we would hold those private sessions, which will be of approximately 7 minutes length. And in those private sessions, again, let me iterate, everything will be absolutely confidential, and we have no authority to divulge it without your explicit permission. So if that helps regarding understanding the procedure of the mediation, I would like to pass my time back to Kit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ishrat. So before we move on, does anyone have any questions regarding what we have gone through? Okay, so I believe that there are no questions. So before we begin the joint session, I'd like to lay down some ground rules considering how our session is currently being held on Zoom due to the extenuating circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the rules I have for today, first, only one person is to be speaking at a time, and I will kindly require the other party to mute yourselves when you are not speaking. Second, I will need everyone to speak at a slower pace because this session is on Zoom. And third, I will require both parties to show respect to one another throughout this session, so do refrain from interrupting the other party when speaking. Fourth, given the multicultural nature of our mediation session today, I would like to request for all parties to maintain cultural respect for each other. And lastly, before we begin, just as Ishrat has mentioned, to give a better understanding of what the structure of our opening statements and agenda setting will be like, after the first party gives their opening statements, Ishrat will summarize before the second party speaks, after which I will summarize, and this will be then followed by agenda setting. Yep, I believe that at this point in time, perhaps you can continue on to the opening statements. Ishrat, if you have anything to add.
Just this one thing, that if I'm looking down, please don't think I've fallen asleep. I'm just making a note of everything that is being said. Thank you so much. If we may have either of the parties opening on their mutual understanding. Thank you.
I don't mind going first if it's agreeable to party B.
Yeah, sure. Please do go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you to the mediators for giving such a good opening statement. It really, I think, eased everybody into the mediation, as I know my client hasn't done a mediation before. So that was a really great introduction. So good morning, everyone. As I stated, my name is Zachary Hatton, and I am the counsel for FGT. I'm excited about today's session, and I wanted to thank everybody for coming to the table, especially counsel for JPC for recommending the mediation session, because I think mediation is a really great and effective way to discuss how we're going to approach the upcoming international conference in Glasgow. I've advised my client that today's proceedings are strictly confidential, so I think that will help flow discussion a little bit more going forward. And we are here mainly to talk about the environmental impact of battery making and how my client's company has worked to make the battery making process more environmentally friendly. However, as my client will discuss, we are also working with local authorities to eliminate child labor in the region. And I think that's a really effective step to combating the issues in Johula. We understand that you may have previous thoughts about our company, but we're really hoping that you will come in with an open mind and work to a collaborative outcome that works for both parties. I appreciate, again, you all for being here, and I look forward to today's session. With that, I'll pass it to my client to introduce herself and give us a little highlight on what she would like to discuss today. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Hello, everyone. As I stated before, my name is Brianne Mention, and I am the president of the board of the Future Green Tech Company. We are an international business best known for our innovative technology around the production of batteries. Right now, our main mission is to develop and sell a cobalt-free lithium-ion battery by 2025. And in today's session, we would like to go ahead and create a fostering relationship that will allow us to go forward together and benefit from each other's knowledge and expertise to have the best outcome possible, both for the environment and the citizens and anybody in the area of which our company has had any impact on previously. We do know that you may have some concerns about our company, and that is why we are so excited to be here with you today. We would like to allow you the opportunity to ask us the questions you would love clarification on, and we would be more than happy to give you those answers. The goal for us today is to come out with a relationship where we are able to trust each other, able to open up, share ideas, and go forward. I'm also the head of the Future Green charity. The charity is something that is dear to my heart, as I've always been interested in climate change and advancing the environmental aspect of technology. Within the Future Green charity, we are also working on a project called Green. This project would help identify natural components and effective routes to produce synthetic material to replace cobalt. And knowing the massive cobalt mining happening in Johula right now, I feel as though that is a point that we will be able to collaborate on going forward. Thank you very much for my time, and I look forward to hearing the opposite opinion.
Thank you so much for that opening from FGT. And what I understand from your opening and what I understand as per your position is that you want to discuss the environmental impact of battery making, and you want to talk about ways to make it more economically sustainable, and that you have undertaken discussion with authorities to make sure, and you want to discuss that further. If there's anything I've missed out, if there's anything you'd like to add to the agenda, could you please do that, or is this fine?
The only aspect that I would like to add is that a big part of this mediation for us today is fostering a relationship and a trusting relationship. And that's a main point that we would like to go with today as well.
Perfect. So I understand the other agenda is to work with FPC and build the trust and construct a beautiful relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may just add, I heard an interesting point from Brianne regarding what you mentioned was a new green project, which is able to identify natural components and synthetic materials to replace cobalt. So I believe that this is an interesting point that perhaps we can bring up in the main session, in the joint session later on as well. Yep. So perhaps at this point, maybe we can move on to this hearing from the Johula Parks Company Limited's opening statements.
Thank you for that. Hi everyone, I'm Zephyr and I'm the head of Johula Parks Company, or JPC for short. With me here today is Jia Ying, who is my legal counsel. I'm glad we can be here today to mediate this issue, and I do look forward to being able to come up with a collaborative solution together. I think it'd be good at this stage, just I guess to clarify and let you all know that we've come here with open minds. We're willing to be transparent about our concerns and issues, and we are committed to solving this issue together. Just a bit about us here at JPC. We are the chief authority in charge of preserving the national parks of Johula, which contain a rich array of wildlife and biodiversity in Johula. Apart from being a symbol of our country's biodiversity, these parks are also home to some of our most endangered and precious native species, such as the Johula gorilla, which tourists the world over visit our country for, to witness the incredible behaviors and uniqueness they possess. We have big plans to develop our ecological tourism industry in our national parks, which we manage here at JPC. And we do hope to find partners who will help us achieve this lifetime goal of ours. However, with that being said, there are two issues that currently plague us and which we really do feel are important to address in this mediation session. The first issue is to do with reports concerning illegal mining in our parks and its use of child labor. According to various reports and intel we've received, child labor is still currently a reality, and we are sad to report that many companies who purchase stocks of cobalt sourced from Johula do so at the expense of exploiting illegal mining activities, which involve the use of child labor. We don't mean to question your incentives and motives as a company, given your involvement and reliance on the supply of cobalt currently, and our own share of cobalt reserves, we do think this is reasonable grounds for us to assume that this is an issue relevant to the both of us and that we should address. The second issue that we'd like to address is to do with illegal mining activities in our parks and its impact on our biodiversity and wildlife. The existence of many former rebels, illegal mining organizations in our park, and the activities they conduct are threatening the natural biomes and habitats of our precious wildlife, and as such, many of them are on the verge of extinction. So this is an issue which we would very much like to address because of the importance of preserving our wildlife from both a conservationist point of view, with a keen interest in preserving and sustaining our environment and natural habitats, but also with an interest in our country's own ecological tourism industry as well. With that said, I do hope we can come to a mutually beneficial agreement that is both sustainable and enforceable. We're open to solutions, possible future collaborations between us to address these issues, and we have come here today prepared to offer our own solutions, as well as consider perhaps the solutions offered to us as well. So today, as difficult as things may seem, I do hope that we can work together as a team to navigate this jungle we currently find ourselves in and come to an agreement that we can both be proud of. I'd now like to hand over to my lawyer, Tiaing, for her thoughts on this as well.
Thank you for that. And I also like to firstly thank FGP for giving us such a warm introduction. I'm so happy to hear that Brienne's company right now is working hard to promote environmental sustainability through, I hear, cleaner and greener methods for research for the manufacturing process for batteries in the future. And I also hear that you're working with local authorities to help eliminate the problem of child labor. But I just like to sum up what Zephyr has said. I think it's important to reiterate that as people, as you know, on behalf of Johulu, we are interested in the preservation, the biodiversity that we have in our parklands, and as you guys can tell, our animals and ecology are dear to Zephyr's heart. But not only do we have an abundance of wildlife and biodiversity, we also have an abundance of coltan, which is, from what we understand, an essential ingredient in the making of batteries, as well as concerning cobalt. And so at this point of time, Zephyr is deeply concerned about the situation involving child labor for cobalt minings. And let's just put it out here for everyone that we chose to give mediation a chance because we know that this opportunity will allow us to open up and to understand what opportunities and what possibilities we have moving forward, working together. And we want to emphasize that we do not wish to point fingers. We do not wish to, follow assumptions. We just really want to truly understand FGT's current motivations, your operations. And so keeping at the forefront of our minds, my client's interest in the preservation of our parklands. We would love to hear more about FGT's current operation of the company, and also to hopefully work together towards a future promise or agreement to eliminate any current problems regarding the child labor issue that we have, as well as even any future collaborations. We would love to hear from you. And with that, thank you.
Thank you so much to JPC for giving their opening statements. I believe that if I may give a quick summary regarding what has just been said by JPC. So I'm very happy to hear that both JPC and FGT are really here in the spirit of mediation to collaborate and find a collaborative solution together. And as JPC mentioned, they really have an open mind and they wish to be transparent and are in fact committed to solving the issues together at hand today. And I'm glad to hear that both parties are really in the spirit of mediation today. And if I may I'm also heartened to hear what grand plans JPC actually has, which is to develop an ecological tourism industry. And they're hoping to find parties to help them achieve this goal. And in particular, I've managed to see about 2 points raised by JPC. First being that they would like to talk about the reports concerning illegal mining in parks as well as child labor. And the second regarding illegal mining activities and the impact on the wildlife, as I understand from JPC that the wildlife is really very important to them and they really wish to preserve such biodiversity, ecology, and the animals. May I clarify if I've accurately stated the point to JPC?
Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So at this point in time, I believe that it will be opportune for us to move into agenda setting, given that we have heard both parties' opening statements. And the same rules will apply as what we had done for the opening statements, where Ishak will summarize FGT's agenda, and I will summarize the second. And thereafter, we will reconcile the agenda based on commonalities between both parties before moving on to the joint session. And I hope that you understand that we choose not to use the whiteboard function or share screen simply because we wish to spend more time listening to the interests raised by the parties, rather than focusing on noting down the particularities, as agendas are meant to be broad. So formalities aside, we shall now begin with the agenda setting proper.
Right, thank you so much, Kit. If you could, note down FGT's agenda that I have listed, and then you could perhaps note down the agenda you have listed on behalf of JPC.
Or perhaps would FGT or JPC like to reiterate the agenda, or would it be the points raised earlier on regarding the 2 points? Because I believe that there are in fact commonalities regarding the
yes, there are some common grounds, definitely.
So I believe that we can actually narrow them down to 2 agendas. Really, first point being understanding the past issues regarding child labor as well as the impact on wildlife, and the second point being working on future collaborative solutions to solve these 2 issues. So what I'm currently suggesting is a 2-point agenda. The first, really exploring past issues, and the second, to really work on finding collaborative solutions for the future. But I believe that this could perhaps encompass what both parties have stated. But maybe we can hear from both FGT and JPC regarding whether they have any agendas that they would like to add. Perhaps we can start with FGT first.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Mediator. I was wondering if it might be beneficial to both parties to maybe separate the child labor and environmental impact. I think that those are 2 issues, but I think we might benefit from having them as separate points and being able to talk about them together, but separate points on the agenda, if that's acceptable to JPC.
If I may add on this point, I actually do agree with what Zach has mentioned, but I do actually propose a 3-point agenda. So maybe let me just elaborate a little bit more on that. Firstly, it is I think my client, Zephyr, really wants to understand where FGT comes from and FGT's operation. So firstly, actually, we would love to understand your motivations and your operations. That's number 1 on our agenda. And secondly, I echo Zach's point about the environmental concerns at this point of time. And maybe then we can, under this broad umbrella of environmental concerns, then we can also move on to talk about the child labor situation. These are two distinct problems, but also under the broad ground of environmental concerns that we have at this point. And maybe the last thing that we are excited to discuss actually today at the mediation table will be some future collaborations as well as opportunities that we can embark on together as two companies coming together. So we wonder if, Zach and Brianne, you're okay with this?
Yes, absolutely. That sounds like a good agenda on our end as well.
Yep, so if I may recapitulate on what I've heard by Jia-Ying, it's really a 3-point agenda. The first being that of understanding motivations, second, that of environmental issues, and third, that of future collaborations. And may I clarify if this is what has been stated, correct, accurately?
Yes, the first one is future, obviously current operation of FGT. That is something JPC wants to know. The second one is the environmental impact that obviously Zach was talking about. And the final one is the future collaboration, and which, will cover the mining and other things. Yeah.
Yep, thank you so much for reiterating the point, Ishrat. So may I clarify that, to ensure that we're all on the same page, does FGT agree with this agenda as well? I've sent it in the chat box so that everyone is able to refer to it for easier reference. So are both parties agreeable? Excellent. Okay, thank you so much. So on that note, perhaps we can start on the first agenda of understanding motivations. Are both parties agreeable with this?
Ms. Mediator, we were just wondering if both parties might benefit from an initial caucus, just as we were not given the opportunity to have pre-mediation meetings. So I think it might be effective if the mediators understand both of our sides and are able to kind of work from there, if that's agreeable.
So just to
certainly agreeable. And I'm sorry, I'm cutting it. I'm so sorry. Please carry on.
Sorry. So I'd just like to confirm that FGT would like to call for a private session with the mediators. Is that accurate? Zachary, is that so? You would like to call for? Yep. Okay. Thank you so much. So I'd just like to reiterate that the private session would then last for a maximum of 7 minutes, and during this time, perhaps we could have Darshini, our session supervisor, to help us place the other party into a breakout room. If JPC is okay with this, is JPC agreeable to this as well?
Yes, we're fine with this. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. Then could we have Darshini's help to help us move the other party into a breakout room, and the private session with us will then take place in the main room. Thank you so much. Yep, so before we begin our session, I believe that the other team has been moved into the breakout room, but just so that we're on the same page. So I'd like to reiterate what Ishrat had earlier mentioned during the rules, whereby whatever you share with us, the mediators, during the caucus, will stay strictly confidential unless you allow us to share certain pieces of information with the other party. So maybe before we begin, can we hear for your feelings regarding why you'd like to call this mediation session? I understand you mentioned that we had not had a pre-mediation session, is that right? To understand.
Yes, that's right. My client is, should we be waiting for the other judge to come back, or should we just keep going?
I think it should be fine to keep going.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, thank you. So I believe that my client has a few concerns because ahead of the International Caucus conference, there has been some issues with worrying about whether we can trust the other side or not. So we were hoping that through your mediation, we could build up a level of trust with them, that we would be able to start sharing our plans. We do have a project that my client might be able to speak more of, but we can only really offer it if we build up a relationship of trust.
I understand that you mentioned that. Oh, so sorry. I understand that you mentioned that you have some issues with trusting the other side. Perhaps maybe you would like to wish to elaborate a bit more about what issues had arisen to leading to this trust.
Absolutely. So we do have an inkling that they may be working with a company that has very similar career goals as our company does, meaning that if we were to give them more information than what we are comfortable trusting them with, we aren't sure whether or not that information could be leaked to a competing company, possibly our designs or the different places, universities and charities that we have been working with to develop our technology. So what we are hoping to do is offer to them both aid from us, but also the main goal is for them to support us at this upcoming conference so that we can have that relationship going forward.
Right. So what I understand from you, Brianne, is that you're looking to consult with another party regarding the designs, and you want to, is this an information you want to be shared with JPC at this point?
So I think you may have misunderstood my point. It's that we have already been working on this technology, and if we are to share our plans and try and collaborate, the other negotiators are. I have an inkling that they are working with another company that does similar work to what we do. So our concern would be giving away too much information before we're sure whether or not we can trust that information.
Right. And how do you feel about it? Do you feel that the concerns are worrying enough that makes you that prevents you from carrying on the collaboration? Is this worrisome to that stage?
I am more confident after hearing the opening statements. It seems that they're here with an open mind, and that's exactly why we're here as well. And I can see that we have common goals. So I am slightly more comfortable than I was coming in, but I definitely think that we have some trust to be building up, and I'm hoping to do so during my explanation of exactly how we're rectifying the acts that they have questions about, including child labor. So my goal would be to possibly ask if you as mediators could possibly step in and check in on that trust aspect and help us decide when the right time would be to bring all of that information forward.
Thank you. So
we
just
would be glad to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for Ishrat. So if I just clarify, so it will be permissible for us to share this particular piece of information regarding these possible trust issues, and you would like to ask to confirm whether they have in fact been working with other competing companies. Is that accurate?
Yes, you're
welcome. So sorry, Brianne. I've just advised my client to proceed as she sees fit. I think bringing up the trust issues directly, saying that we have trust issues to the other side might break down our talks rather than build them up. I think what Brianne is looking for is just steering towards building up that trust before we start sharing that. So we do feel really confident on our child labor. So potentially going to child labor before the environment might be something that would be agreeable to Brianne, but I don't want to put words in her mouth.
I would be comfortable with you mentioning that some of our hesitation comes from the fact that we are unsure of if they are working with other companies or not. And if they're willing to speak on that point to us, I think that would be a good point for building that trust.
Sure, thank you so much. I just like to say I'm very happy to hear that both Brianne and Zachary really have such trust, and after hearing the opening statements that you really wish to further listen to what the other side has to say, and coming to this mediation session today, it seems that you have been hoping to collaborate with them as well and better understand that side of the story. So, and I believe that trust is a two-way street. So perhaps it would be good for us to both listen to the side of the story as well as for you to maybe quell some of the doubts regarding what these trust issues that may be at hand currently. So perhaps maybe it will be more apt for FGT to bring this up on, perhaps if it would be possible for you to bring this up, or would you prefer for us mediators to bring it up to the other party?
I think that I would be comfortable bringing up that I'm not sure where they stand with other companies, but not at this point. I think there would need to be a little bit more conversation from them on how they're feeling before we go into that conversation.
Sure, definitely. I feel like the rest of the joint mediation session could perhaps be spent learning more about each other's interests before we delve, and then perhaps at that moment, you'll be able to better understand what their position is and whether they are indeed working with other competing companies. on that note, Ishrat, will you have anything to add?
Yeah, yes, I do. And Brian, actually, I totally understand your concern and Zach's concern regarding not being sure about their operation with other organizations. And whenever you feel that you're confident, I mean, obviously you're confident, but whenever you're absolutely certain you want to share it is when it will be shared. So I think we will move back to the joint session. And from there on, we can get some facts from them and maybe later, when it's convenient, discuss this with them.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And once again, everything was confidential that you have said till this point, and we have the agreement to disclose this information, but only at your, permission and only at your understanding of it. So I think we'll have the parties back. Thank you so much.
Yep, hi, we are back.
Oh, welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back. So perhaps we could start. Perhaps if FGT would like to share anything regarding what we have just discussed, or would JPC would like to start with discussing, or would you like to start discussing the first point in the agenda?
Perhaps actually we could discuss the first point in the agenda just to get us going.
Would FGT be agreeable to that as well? For us to start on the first point agenda of understanding motivations?
Absolutely. I think that's a good place to start. Thank you.
Yeah, perhaps we can hear from FGT regarding FGT or JPC. Would you like to start with discussing the first point on the agenda?
That's fine. I can start. Sorry, my computer temporarily froze.
No problem. Zephyr, please tell us what brings you here and anything that you want to start off with. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So perhaps I will start with the first point on the agenda, and just so that we're clear where we are going in this, discussion, and just to outline a clear, framework for the current mediation session, I'll discuss our first concerns under the first agenda of understanding FGT, and perhaps my counsel Tiang will help me address the later 2 points on the environmental concerns as well as solutions for future collaboration. So for us, the reason that we were very, set on this first point as an item on our agenda is that we really want to understand FGT's motivations, how they operate as a company and what their real concerns are in this issue. Just to be transparent and to really share with you, our own background in dealing with this issue. Last month, we did meet up with another group called SVOL regarding development of ecological tourism and protection of our biodiversity. And we were quite disappointed in that regard because we left with the impression that they were very, if at all, very uninterested in our concerns of biodiversity, as well as to do with the issue of child labor. So I guess the questions that we have that we like clarification with FGT, and we don't mean to, intrude too much in the background details of how your company operates, but just broadly, you could state to us, your own commitment to environmental sustainability, your own knowledge of your own supply chain, and whether or not child labor is in fact involved in your supply chain, and what perhaps you are currently doing, which we may not be aware of, coming to this mediation to address these 2 issues. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. So just to start off, I would like to say that I would be disappointed as well hearing that the other company wouldn't share your motivations to care for the environment. And that's something that we hold dear to our hearts. So I hope that is something that motivates you to want to work with us as much as we are excited to work with you. Now, I do know that we have had some bad publicity around the child labor allegations, and we have taken extensive steps to rectify this and try and work towards ensuring that we are able to eradicate child labor in mining completely. Now, what my main goal was for this, I started the Green Charity Company in 2016, and that was our main goal. After finding out that 40,000 children work in inhumane conditions in revolving around mining, we were appalled. And once we found out that we had companies working with us that were getting cobalt from those child mining services, we immediately took action, and our companies have now completely moved away from any manufacturers that have been involved in those allegations. As well, we have been working closely with the government through our charity and NGOs we have been working closely to try and influence the relationship with the government so that we can move forward. And our plan is to eradicate child labor mining by 2025. So that's a plan that we would like to, hopefully, when talking about future events, work with you on as well. So this also has led to drawing the Child Protection Act's laws, and as well, you're looking into the different mining codes and really ensuring that people who are taking advantage of these children are really paying the price for it. And for that reason, there's not only a huge fine, but there are definitely legal implications that can be taken if these are not followed in the future. So we have completely dedicated ourselves to not only rectifying within our company, but we also want to build up what we have started to tear down. We weren't aware that we were a part of child mining. But now that we do know, we want to do everything in our power to try and rectify as best as we can. And I know that my council has something to say on that aspect as well.
Yes, thank you, Brianne. So I just wanted to thank JPC actually for their quick action. After the amnesty report, we did receive a letter from JPC to our CEO, Ole Olsen. And we did respond in a very quick time and good manner. So I appreciate your concern about the child labor and the amnesty rights. And as my client was talking about, we were talking about Article 299B of the Mining Code 2018, which bans mining from sites where laws protecting human rights, specifically women and children rights, are violated, and that would be at a price of $10,000 a day. So that's definitely something that we're working with the government of Johula and the governments of the world, frankly, to try and eradicate quickly. And I would just like, before I pass it back to the other side, to see if my client had anything else to add on that.
Absolutely. We do just want to stress that as much as this is an issue within our company, we very much so feel that this issue is far more far-reaching than either of our two organizations. And for this reason, we have been putting forward the motivations to get other companies on our side. And so far, we have had 8 other major companies to commit to no longer using any facility that's related to child mining, and closer looking at their supply chain as well as the supply chain of our company to ensure that we are far more aware of what's happening so that there is no oversights again in the future. I hope that answers your questions.
Yes, it does. Maybe at this point I can just talk a little bit about what I've heard from Zach and Brianne. I'm very happy to hear about all the efforts that you have put into eliminating the problem of child labor. And I'm very happy to see that you took quick action, especially upon hearing news that any of these child labor incidents were happening on our grounds. And you also tried to eliminate any problems immediately after you knew that any of the companies that you work with had anything to do with child labor. And we are thrilled to see that. Definitely, I'm sure Zephyr is very happy about that. However, from what I understand about the supply chain of cobalt. The supply chain of cobalt is a very complex process. So, I mean, it comes from the mining itself, then the transporting, and I'm pretty sure I'm not too well educated on the entire process of mining, but according to what my client Zephyr has told me, it's really a long chain of problems and a long chain of transporting and mixing of materials before they go into our cell phones that we use in every day. So we really would like to ask you about that, because that is your field of expertise. Understanding that there are a lot of steps that go into producing cobalt and ultimately, producing these batteries. We do want to find out if you're aware, if at any single step of this, if you could be a little bit more transparent about the process of obtaining of cobalt and ultimately manufacturing of batteries, if any of these complex processes involve any transactions or any collaborations with any companies that have possibly anything to do with child labor, because the last thing that Zephyr will want to be associated with is any events of child of child labor, because that is the last thing that Zephyr would want to work with and work on. So can I just please ask you to clarify a little bit more about that? Thank you.
Sorry, before we pass the time on to hear FGT's clarification regarding that point on the supply chain, may I just clarify, is this perhaps moving into the second point on the agenda on environmental issues? Because I understand you're trying to learn more about the cobalt making process, which is linked to that of the illegal mining as well. So, and the other issues.
Sorry, maybe let me answer your question first, Ms. Mediator. Actually, no, we're right now, we are still on I believe that we are still on the first agenda if Zach and Brianna are agreeable to it, because at this point of time, we still just want to understand their operations before we move on into finding future solutions to reduce the problem of child labor. But maybe before, I'm so sorry because I knew Brianna wanted to speak, but maybe I'd like to pass the time on to my client, Zephyr, to talk a little bit more about his concerns as well, so that maybe Brianna can better respond to what the problems we have.
Thanks, Jiang. I won't take up too much time. So just to clarify, Ms. Mediator, we are just at the first agenda to understand motivations. We're not laying down anything concrete at this stage. This is really more about information gathering and understanding FGT from our side.
Right. So what I get from Lee is that you want to know further about the mining process, and this is actually part of the operation of FGT. Have I understood you correctly? Perfect. So yes, Brianna and Zach, would you respond?
Absolutely. Thank you. So I do want to be as transparent as I possibly can. It is a very complex chain. So for the sake of clarity, we have moved away from any company that involves with child labor and are committed to only working with companies that have the same goals as us to, in the long term, eradicate child labor as well as in the current. So currently we're working with a Chinese global company called Who Knows, and the company has put forward a detailed plan and program to eliminate child labor from their supply chain completely. So with those efforts, it allows us as a company to step back from the supply chain in the slightest, while being confident that those who are managing that chain are completely on the same page and have the same goals that you and I seem to have, Zephyr. So looking into that as well, I believe my counsel has a point to add to this, if I can pass it over to Zachary.
Yes, I just wanted to stress our absolute need for eradication of child labor. I actually am very excited about what my client is doing on the field. So she's actually using the FGT and the charity together to work with a close connection with the Johula government. And because of this partnership, they have actually already released a strategic document that will seek to eradicate child labor by 2025. And the last point I wanted to make was just that all of our clients are working just as hard as we are to work on the supply chain issue. They're doing it in different ways. Some are working with NGOs to ensure, some are more looking into their supply chain, and some are actually auditing their supply chain. But we require all of the clients that we work for to have some reasonable standards. And actually, before I pass it back to my client, I would like to put a point out there that we would be excited if you would work, Lee and Stefan, with us to actually better bring into the present the reasonable standards guidelines that we as a company are using. So I'll pass that back to my client.
Absolutely. And we don't want to go too far off agenda. The last small point that I did want to bring up on this as well is this is a short-term goal. And I know when I say that it may be alarming to you, but the reason it's a short-term goal is because we don't believe that cobalt is going to be a useful material in the future, because this is something that stretches over all agendas, and meaning that it's not good in the sense of child labor, in the environment, and the abuse that the mining process has taken on cobalt. So our company is also putting forward technology to try and make synthetic materials that will replace cobalt completely. So that would completely eradicate the need for mining and both benefit in the aspect that, of course, child labor would be lessened if there was no mining to do, as well as the environment on the next topic as well.
Thank you for the information. That was really helpful. So I'm very glad to see, when I first heard that the elimination of the child labor issue was a short-term goal, I was initially a little bit shocked, but then I heard the good news that it was because Brienne's company is moving away from the use of cobalt and will be exploring other forms of cleaner, greener, sustainable energy. So I'm very happy to hear that. And on this point, I'd like to say that I'm very happy to have heard about the operations of your company. And I think all of what you've mentioned is currently in line with what Zephan had in mind for a company that he wants to work with to, further the interest about firstly preventing child labor, and secondly about promoting some sort of ecological tourism on our lands. So actually, if Zach and Brianne are agreeable at this point of time, I believe that we have actually completed Agenda 1, or is there anything to add? Maybe I can pass time to my client Zephan if you have any pressing concerns that we have yet to miss, that we've missed out.
Thank you for that, Jiaying. Yes, I'm equally glad to hear, as Jiaying has mentioned, that FGT is also equally committed to the same goal of reducing child labor, and that they're also equally committed to the environmental impact of their actions in terms of what I heard about reducing the use of cobalt in their batteries by the point of 2025, and also reducing child labor by 2025. I guess one point of clarification I would like to raise is concerning something I think Brianne mentioned earlier, to do with the fact that they only work with other partner organizations and perhaps NGOs that they know are also themselves not involved in child labor. And just to be transparent with you, we did receive a report from an organization called Swiss 22, which did show us that, and it did trace the supply chain of cobalt, which I do understand and appreciate is very complex and complicated and can be convoluted. So in no way do we think this is an easy task, but just, I guess, to appreciate the report that we received from Swiss 22, what it did show is that one of the partner organizations that you did mention, the Chinese company CD Mining, also known locally as CDM, even though they had made statements amounting to the fact, statements representing themselves as not being involved in child labor in any way, what Swiss 22 did tell us was that based on hidden camera evidence and investigative work, that CDM was in fact still involved in some child labor operations. Whether or not they did this knowingly, or whether or not this is just due to the inherent convolutedness of the cobalt supply chain itself, that's only speculative. But I guess what we'd like to clarify is, given this information that we do have, how would you, I guess, see as the most sustainable or perhaps the most effective way to ensure that the organizations that you are working with are in fact not involved in child labor in any way, given this clear contrast between, I guess, reports on our side and what CDM themselves have said?
Perhaps before we hear from FGT regarding this, and maybe I may summarize the points that we have already gone through regarding the first agenda, since I believe that we have agreed on several points, and I believe that FGT has really shed some light, and I thank both parties for their honesty in sharing such information at this mediation session today. So I've taken down 3 points, and perhaps I can send into the chat box for everyone for easier reference. So from what I've gathered, I see that FGT has really elaborated on the efforts they have taken since finding out more about child labor issues, and they've also began to explore other forms of cleaner, sustainable methods. And both parties are really committed to the same goals of reducing environmental impact and child labor. And I understand that Zephan has raised this concern regarding the Chinese company. So perhaps, would this be related to the second point on environmental issues, or will we still be wishing to hear more about the understanding motivations? May I clarify this with Zephan, perhaps?
Yes, so perhaps we can meld this into the next agenda to do with solutions to the child labor issue, as well as the environment.
I believe Zevon has faced some connection issues, but I believe that he's saying that he wishes to mold this in with the second agenda point. Is that right, Jia Ying? Is that right, Lee?
Sure. I think this comes under the heading of...
Yeah.
Sorry, can everyone hear me now?
Yes, we are able to hear you now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that.
Please.
Yeah.
No worries at all. Yep, so I believe, Zephan, if I may just clarify, you mentioned that you wish to continue this point under the second agenda. Is that accurate? From what I heard,
yes, that's correct. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I just want to make it clear so that we are on the same page that we will be moving into the second point on the agenda on environmental issues. So perhaps you can hear from FGT regarding this point regarding the Chinese company raised by the clarification that Zephan wishes to make.
Absolutely. So we have actually received those reports as well. And that was one main reason why we ensured that they had that goal set out to eradicate the child labor within their company by 2025. We understand on their point that it is a very complicated issue and that we believe from what we've been told by the company that they weren't necessarily aware of it, but now that they are also very much so having the same goals that you and I have. So with that in mind, in the future, our plan is to, first of all, if we can eradicate the mining of it completely, that would be the utmost preferable outcome to this. But in the short term, while choosing different companies, to work with in the future, we want to be able to flesh out their motivations around child labor and the progression of a safer and legal way to obtain any materials that they so choose. So in these efforts, we did move out of Johula in 2019 to move to this company. And we have been working closely to try and update the regulations that are used in terms of different aspects of child labor. So with this and the strategic document that was set out to eradicate child labor by 2025, we feel as though if we can implement these guidelines across the board with the companies that we will be working with, this will actually solve the problem altogether. And if we can, with your help preferably, update these guidelines to ensure that there are no small loopholes so that you can blame the fact that, for example, you didn't know, and everyone would always be aware of exactly where their material is coming from and what values are associated with that. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Council?
No, thank you for your summation, Brianne. I think you did a good job.
Right. So if my understanding is correct, then I think, Zephan, what Brianne is saying is that the solution to implement further guidelines and really strengthening the fact that prevention of child labor will be ensured. Is that a workable solution for you? Is that a step that you think will work as well as Brianne and Zach believes?
Maybe I can. Oh, Zephan, you'd like to go first? Definitely.
Sorry. Thank you for the clarification. I am very heartened to hear that they are in fact that they have addressed my question, but perhaps to do with I guess the more intricate details involving the supply chain and ensuring that there is no involvement in child labor. Perhaps I can leave it to Jia Ying, my counsel, to flesh out these issues in more detail.
Thank you, Zephan. I guess what concerns I have at this point, one of them especially, because I do note that you have this set of guidelines that you and your company seems to be working on and cooperating very tightly over. But I want to reiterate Zephan's concerns about child mining on our land, because child labor on our land. Child labor is an important problem because these are children, not even 10 years old, and they're out there mining for their livelihood so that they can survive and have meals for the next day forward. And we are very concerned, definitely, also about the human rights and the children rights involved in this issue. And I believe actually just now, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it was Brianne or Zach that brought up Article 299B of the Mining Code. Right now, we are very concerned and we want to protect the human rights revolving around the women and children on our lands. So I was wondering if the guidelines that you were mentioning earlier, Brianne, I was wondering if they were in line with our current mining code right now, S299B. Maybe you can shed a bit of light on what the guidelines truly entail and if they are in line and coherent with S299B, because that will be one of Zephon's main priorities and concerns in this mediation.
Hi, thank you so much, Lee. Before we move on to hearing FGT's opinion regarding this, perhaps I believe that it would be apt for us to call a private session at this point, because I believe that we are able to we can perhaps discuss more about this option that the FGT had earlier raised regarding this strategic document, as well as possibly like implementing this across the board of companies and updating the guidelines on JPC's side. So perhaps we can discuss this during the private session. And I believe that we have been discussing this issue for perhaps the past 10 minutes. So I believe that it will be apt for us to call a private session at this juncture. Will both parties would be amicable to this?
I was just wondering if my party could provide just a brief 30-second answer to the question, just to give the peace of mind.
Sure, no worries.
Sure, please. It is your process and it's your dispute.
Yeah, Zachary, you may begin the 30 seconds.
Sorry, I was just wondering if my client had anything to say about the question posed.
Yeah, absolutely. So in relation to Article 299B of the Mining Code, that was revised in 2018, which I'm sure you're aware of. And that was when it was banning the mining and sale of mining products from sites where laws protecting human rights and the rights of women and children are violated. And of course, it comes with a $10,000 US a day fee until the violation has ceased. So while that is absolutely something that we take into consideration. That is something that is, first of all, it is the law, and that is something that we very much so are always in terms to follow. But as well, that does fall into one of the main goals of the charity that I run, being human rights. So this is a huge, huge step forward, but it's not enough. And I think that we can both agree that there are companies that are making far more than $10,000 a day on these products. And that's why I say that while our company is in line with this, we don't necessarily fully agree with this. And we would like to continue the revision process and have continued the revision process. And if you do have any suggestions coming forward on that, we would be more than happy to work with you in the future to ensure that you're both comfortable with that and that we're able to advance it in general. So I apologize if that was a long answer to the question, but that is all I have to say.
No worries. Thank you so much, Brianne. Perhaps we can move into the private session to hear more about JPC's opinion regarding the clarifications that had just been raised by FGT.
Kate, I would just like to say something. I think we should only go for the private session if JPC also requires it. So the first question I think is, do you think that it is the time for us to go into a private session right now? Zephon, if you are fine with it, then we can go forward with it.
I think the private session is a great idea at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Then perhaps we can have Darshini help us to move the other party into a breakout room. And once again, the private session will last for a maximum of 7 minutes. Thank you so much for your help.
Everything is confidential in the private session, so yes, nothing to worry about.
Sorry, are we good to go now? I believe Zachary is still in the room. I'm not sure if it's a connection issue. Okay, okay. I believe 7 minutes would start. Yep. Yeah. So as Ishra has mentioned, it will be indeed confidential, whatever you share with us in this private session. So perhaps we can hear more about your feelings regarding the clarification that was just raised by FGT.
Yeah. So I think just to flesh out our own position right now, and from what we understand of FGT's position themselves, we understand that they're also very equally committed to reducing the impact of child labor, and they have outlined these guidelines to us. And I guess when we initially raised that clarification to do with its compliance with Article 299B, I guess that was in the interest of ensuring that not only was this, I guess, a guideline that adheres to the interest of, reducing child labor, but also something that is legally viable in our own country. I guess at this stage, what we'd really like to flesh out from here on is to really understand more about how this guideline, the specifics, I guess, of the guideline, and how, I guess, a possible solution that we can use to implement these guidelines in Johula to ensure the impact of child labor, not just to do with FGT directly, but also to do with other companies that I know FGT has raised that may possibly be involved in child labor themselves. For example, the CDM issue that we raised to do with the reports that we received from Swiss 22. Perhaps I can also let Jiaying flesh out our position.
Right. So what I'm getting from you, I'm sorry. Please continue, please.
Okay, maybe I'll just sum up a little bit about what Zephan has said so that we are all on the same page. I think what Zephan wishes to see is, I think he wants some insight into what these guidelines by the other party entails, because we know that set of guidelines seem to somehow also trickle into their clients, and we are concerned about the activities of their clients, and if these clients would have anything to do with child labor. We know that it's a long chain, so we would just want to know if any of these companies that currently the other party they're working with would violate any children rights concerns, and on that point. So I guess one thing that we're looking for would be some kind of like a merge between Section 299B as well as the guidelines that they have, so that you can offer us assurance regarding the activities on our lands as well as what is going on in their companies. Maybe I think Zephan would like to elaborate a little bit more about this. Let me pass time to him.
Yes, thanks for that, Tiang. So I think at this stage, if we can go back to the mediation session, we will raise these, I guess, clarifications with them to do with their compliance. I guess their solution for implementing, how they would like to implement this solution, this guideline that they propose in Johula. And perhaps also we have our own proposal that we'd like to raise with them that we think would be successful in ensuring that the supply chain is transparent and ensuring that there's no child labor involved in any part of the supply chain. So I guess for us, since we are very hard to hear, the FGT we have a commonality of interest aligned here. Perhaps we would offer to FGT, and given that FGT also has many multinational clients that they're involved in who are also equally concerned about the issue of child labor, we could perhaps get them to contribute 5% of their marketing budgets for the next 9 years, which is what I have down here, to help us in our efforts to adhere to Article 299B and ensure that there is, regulatory oversight and transparency, and I guess tracking down the supply chains to ensure that we can help children out of mining and back to schools. So I think that's an offer that we'd be prepared to give to FGT when we do go back to the mediation session.
Can I also add on? Sorry, I'm so sorry about this. I just want to substantiate a little point about what Zephan mentioned about this 5% of the marketing budgets on FGT side. Actually, what Zephan and I would be happy to see would be the clients of FGT also willing to chip into this marketing budget, because it's not only on the effort of FGT themselves, but we also want to see some change from these companies that are working closely with FGT. And if all of these companies are on board with that, just like to clarify that this sort of money actually goes into ensuring that into taking care of these children, or if any children are involved in cobalt mining, and just maybe to give them a chance for education and to give them a chance, to have a childhood, and not to be subject to such torturous conditions for the rest of their childhood. And that, so I think that is the premise of Zephan's suggestion. Is that what is correct for you, Zephan?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks for clarifying for me, Jiaying.
Right. So I would like to address a question to Zephan, and the 5% that you have mentioned of the marketing budgets from FGT that you want to be contributed towards adherence of Article 993. How did you reach that number? If you could just tell me, so I can better understand where this offer is coming from.
Perhaps before Zephan and Lee clarify regarding Ishrat's point, if I may also add, I'd like to thank both of you for your transparency in really sharing with us the proposals that you have in mind. And also I'd like to add that I realized that one of the points, the first point you mentioned was really suggesting a merge between Article 299B and the guidelines that are already in place, that FGT earlier mentioned. So I recall earlier that during the joint session, they had actually mentioned the possibility of having JPC updating the guidelines to ensure that there are no loopholes. So perhaps this is in fact a common interest between both parties and something that you could possibly bring up at the main session with them as well.
Okay, so actually just to add on to what you were talking about, we actually want to create some sort of alliance. Actually wanted to mention this under our third point of future collaborations. But what we wanted to see is some sort of collaboration and it lasting into the future, a long-term one. So we actually wanted like a publicity campaign of sorts, but which we'll raise later if we have the chance to. But what we want to see is like a merge between our considerations and their considerations, hopefully into one kind of like policy guiding both of us moving forward. So not only them updating their guidelines, but also keeping their clients notified of this. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm afraid time is up for private session. Yeah, I think the parties will be back here.
Yep, I believe that both Brian and Zach are back into the main session. So perhaps if we may continue off at where we left, we'll continue at where we left off. Maybe Zephan and Lee could raise what we have discussed during the private session and maybe share some of their thoughts regarding what was previously discussed.
Thank you for that. Yes, so I guess going back to the same issue on the current agenda that we find ourselves on to do with reducing child labor, we are very heartened to hear that you are also equally committed to the reduction of child labor and also your adherence to the proposed guidelines. I guess right now what we'd like to offer is a proposal or a solution to the current problem at hand. So for us on our side in Johula, I guess what we'd like to offer is, and what we'd like to clarify with you is whether or not you'd be willing to contribute, because we are aware that you are involved with many multinational clients who are equally committed to reducing the impact of child labor. So perhaps if you would be agreeable to contribute about 5% of your current marketing budgets for the next 9 years to help us implement these proposed guidelines that you have set out for us, and also in compliance with 299B, for us to implement in Johula ourselves to track down the supply chains, ensure that child labor is not an issue, that children aren't being abused in our country, and also to ensure that we can campaign for perhaps legislative clarifications and changes to 299B to ensure there are no loopholes that might be exploited. So just to reiterate, would you be willing to contribute 5% of your marketing budgets for the next 9 years to us? These figures are just something that we have discussed and thought appropriate internally, but please do let me know your thoughts on that.
So I do want some clarification because we would be prepared to offer the 5% for a 9-year time period. But that 5%, though it would be mainly for the first point, I would like to talk about our future relationship before committing to that amount. Just because I feel as though we may be able to edit this specific proposal to match our overall proposal, in which time it may change in the way that I'm not sure how hands-on you were expecting us to be in the process, or if you wanted it to be more of a process where we're sponsoring your company in doing that rectifying. But I think that we are very confident that this is an offer we would like to accept, but I would like to continue discussions on to how we're going to do this in the future before we accept that. If that's, Council, would you be able to let me know if you think that's a fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair that we would move on to what we're willing to do. concerning the time period, I would suggest reducing that to the 2025 timeline, but all decisions are completely up to you. I would just say that once eradicated, that 5% can be pushed into maybe environmental factors.
Maybe it's time for me to give some clarifications on this 9 years and 5%. And you might ask, why 9 years? Why so specific? Why not 10? Okay, because I think moving forward, we want to completely nip this problem in the bud by 2030. And I do understand because actually, Brianne and Zach, you have consistently emphasized on the point that by 2025, you want to move away from the use of cobalt. So what Zephyr and I have in mind is that we would want this 5% of marketing budget to be completely in line with Section 299B, as well as your interest and our interest up to 2025. That is a non-negotiable for us, because it's important for us to use this money to put it to a meaningful purpose, which is to gain influence on some sort of governmental and local level to help these children have a better childhood. And what I propose is, I do understand your concerns about, what about the period from 2025 to 2030? And I'm not sure about our progress by then, because it's 4 years later. But if this problem is completely eradicated by then, maybe it is possible for us to actually spend this 5% on other possible collaborations that actually Zephyr and I had in mind under the third agenda. But for now, I guess this 5% would kind of seem as like a common sum between us that we can focus on the current projects and current collaborations that we have ongoing. And also with regards to the problem about Section 299B, as well as the guidelines that Brianne has mentioned earlier on, would be amenable if somehow in some sort of collaboration or joint statement, maybe we can help to merge these two sets of guidelines. So it's kind of like announcing to the world that, not only will there be no more child mining not only will there be no more cobalt mining on our parklands, there will also be sufficient interest on the part of your clients as well as your company in stopping this child labor issue from the get-go. Wondering what you think about this.
I was wondering if you would be approving to hearing the project idea that my client has, which covers the environmental aspects, as well as where we plan to take the battery over the next few years, and come back to this 5% over 9 years after hearing the project, and we can discuss all of the resolution together, because I think that this problem can be eradicated with a mix of monetary and hands-on approach. I was wondering what my client thought of that.
Yeah, I still don't think I would be comfortable committing to that 5% without talk of how we are going to be able to go forward in the future. And like I said, we are completely open-minded to that idea, but if we can because we have such limited time, if we can possibly go forth, because I believe, if I'm correct, Zephon, we have very similar environmental views. So if we can maybe go forward to that point, I feel like we'll be able to come to a quick agreement, and then I can share with you the pitch that I have for a project that we can work on collaboratively, including the 5% number in that discussion. Is that okay?
I'm sorry, before Zephyr, you can go first.
Thank you. Certainly, I think it's great to hear that we both have our commonality of interests aligned to do with the environmental concern. And certainly, we wouldn't expect you to commit straight away to such as a specific agreement that we put forth right now without, further clarifications on moving forward, possible future collaborations to address all the current issues. And if perhaps we can come to a collaborative solution later on that also addresses the previous issues, then I think that's great. So I would surely love to hear your proposal to do with addressing the second point on the second item of the agenda, to do with the environmental concerns and the impact of illegal mining in my country.
Thank you so much. I was really glad to hear the common interest and how both parties really see the common ground between the goals of JPC as well as FGT today. So perhaps from my understanding, it seems like we have two possible issues and two possible options that are at hand. And if I may send this into the chat before we move on to the possibly discussing a third agenda. However, I believe that we have around 11 minutes left for our mediation session. But I'd like to assure both parties that this is not the end of our discussion, and we are able to continue discussions in following mediation sessions should both parties be open to such subsequent sessions as well. So I have qualified that the two possible options are actually possibly only, and is perhaps contingent, as mentioned by both parties, on the discussion of the third point. So this is not binding in any way. So if you may clarify both parties, is this accurate, or Ishrat, would you like to add anything to the?
Yes, I would like to add something. So what I understand is obviously there are two visible options from FPC and JPC and FGT, and this is something very progressive. I think we have made immense progress in this mediation, but since we're on limited time, that is perhaps something you would like to discuss in another separate session, because you still want to talk about a few points in the agenda. I think the offers are something that we cannot finalize right now, and we can reserve it for the next session. Is my understanding correct of that? Do I see the agreement on both parties?
Yes, that's correct.
Brianne, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to ask if I could ask for clarification on what you said. Your video for me at least cut out, and I didn't hear.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, what I said was we have two offers, possible potential offers on the table, but we are not looking forward to finalizing those. Perhaps we want to get back to the points in the agenda. Is that the statement from both the parties? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I see notes. Thanks a lot.
So if you're comfortable, Zephan, I think that we are on a restricted timeline, given that what we would like from you would be your support at the upcoming conference. So with plans to continue mediation before that conference, we would like to both talk about the environment, but also have time to come to an agreement where we can possibly make an announcement on some of our plans at this conference. So if you would be willing to partner with us on that aspect and ask any questions that you need for that type of clarification, I think that that would be the best option for us to go forward. Would you feel that way as well?
I certainly do. Thank you for that, Brianne. I certainly do think, I guess, us joining hands, publicly at the conference does accord with, I guess, something we also plan for as a solution to this item on the agenda, that being a publicity campaign or something amounting to a public statement for both sides to show that we are in line with protecting the environment, conserving our ecological wildlife and our natural habitats and scenery. And perhaps we can also incorporate, I know that FGT is involved with a lot of different clients and probably has many media prospects and connections. So perhaps we can also utilize that to our advantage in this joint public collaboration and public statement. Perhaps I can also leave this to my lawyer, Jiaying, to flesh out the details in a bit more.
Thank you, Zephan. So to clarify what Zephan has mentioned, since this is quite in line with your conference that somehow it's going to be something that's happening in the future. Actually, since we have already this conference in place, actually we would love to add on to this idea actually. Regarding the idea about the publicity campaign, it's kind of like we want two things to happen in this collaboration. The first one is some sort of joint statement that we'll be working together, working closely to prevent any future incident of cobalt mining on the Johula parklands. And second, maybe a series of publicity materials, including like videos, or even some footage to ensure that to show to the public about this commitment to move away from perhaps even cobalt sources, since that's in line with your futuristic goals, and kind of just to tell the public very forthcomingly and very straightforwardly that both of us, we're trying to move away from this issue of cobalt mining. And I wonder if that sounds cool to Brianne?
Absolutely. I think there is a huge benefit to doing like a press release. I think that if you would be comfortable, possibly we can announce for the first time that we will be taking on a partnership at the conference. I think that would give us both good credibility and possibly good media with a shock value for our partnership. And that would, in and of itself, launch our campaign quite successfully. But if you're comfortable with that aspect, I would like to just share, given the limited time, a few different ideas that we have for working in the future so that you do have a better understanding of exactly what we're offering. Is that fair?
I'm so sorry, Brianne, for cutting you off. However, I believe we have only around 5 minutes left for our mediation session. So perhaps if I could just do a quick summary of what has already been done. And maybe if you'd like to share what solutions you have within the next 30 seconds, would that be possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So
sure,
just as a quick recap, we have talked about the battery. Now, we know that you're very interested in ecological tourism, and we would like to offer you a solution to that issue of offering you the technology to have those cars with the sustainable batteries as your option for that issue that you have coming forward. As well, we wanted to talk about possibly working on completely eradicating the need for cobalt and working on trying to preserve the wildlife that is in those areas so that once we are able to close those cobalt mines, that we are able to start to rehabilitate and start to breed those endangered species to hopefully hopefully ensure that they are off that list. So I believe my council has something to add as well quickly.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Brianne, for sharing these options, which I believe are brilliant for us to really continue such discussions within the next subsequent mediation sessions, should both parties be willing to do so. I believe perhaps at this juncture, maybe I could just send in the chat a quick summary with regard to the possible points under the future collaboration. So I've actually sent this. And I believe that both parties, if I may do a quick summary, because I believe we have 4 minutes left for our mediation session, but I assure both parties that this will not be the end of our mediation session of such discussions should both parties wish to pursue subsequent sessions. So if I may just clarify, are these points under the future collaboration what both parties have agreed on? So I believe that it was first mentioned that there should be a joint conference to show that both parties are in line in conserving the environment, whereby what these would entail, as raised by Lee, I believe, were 2 points: that of a joint statement to show that both parties will be working closely to prevent future incidents of cobalt mining, as well as second, a series of publicity materials, which I believe that Brianne and Zach has also agreed to. Perhaps if Isha has anything to add.
Before I add anything, I would still like to hear what Zach had to say, because Brianne directed the stage to Zach, and if he had to say anything in regards to the options laid out by Brianne, I would listen to that and then summarize my part. Thank you.
So, sorry, I will be very quick. I just wanted to aid in the publicity campaign a little bit by giving this a name that we could agree to today so that we can start getting ready for this publicity. We would suggest Johula Green Tech Project as a name that could be very bringing together of the two parties.
That's a wonderful, yeah, sorry.
Okay, actually, I just wanted to say that Zephyr and I are agreeable to whatever and posted on in the chat, and we are agreeable to Zach's suggestion. However, I think it's in Zephyr's and my interest to direct the Brianne's and Zach's attention right now to the 5% budget that we were talking about, because I see a kind of potential merge between our second agenda and our third agenda, because just now we were talking about how for the 9 years and the 5% marketing budget, would you be agreeable if we spend 2021 to 2025 focusing on alleviating the current problems that we have in child in the child labor situation at this point of time, and for the time being between 2025 and 2030, we can focus on firstly this publicity campaign that I believe is going to continue in the long run. Also, for your second suggestion of the rolling out of electric cars, which sounds like a great idea since we are trying to promote some ecological tourism going on in the Johulu parklands. So I wonder if Brianne would be open to this suggestion. It's a great merging of ideas from what I see.
Absolutely. So that is actually what I was talking about when I was saying that it may change a little bit, was that I would agree that we will be able to agree to the 5% until 2025. And I would actually like to reevaluate that number come 2025. So if we possibly need to allocate more funds or less of a percentage if our funding goes up, for example, so dependent on where we are in that situation, to reevaluate at that time. But I think if we're able to agree to the joint PR press today, then I would be more than happy to commit at least until 2025 to that number.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sorry I'm having to take over. I believe that the time is up, and I think there's a clear agreement on the PR and the campaign that you both wish to host to merge your companies together. And we shall talk about this in the next session. And I am more than delighted to see all of you. And I'm so glad that you have made all this progress, as it is evident in all other chat box of the agenda that we have been able to talk about, and the office that both the parties have been able to generate. I'm extremely happy that with the progress of the session, and with as closing remarks, I would just assign you some homework, and I do not want it to sound childish, but probably some more ideas that you can think about that we can implement in the next session. Yeah, I see nodding heads. So thank you so much. Once again, everything you said here was confidential and only shared on your accord. Thank you so much for being here, and I would like to thank it as well as both the parties for their patience and attention. Thank you.
Since the time is up, I'll
Thank
just
you so
thank
much,
everyone. Yep, thank you.